Thank you for joining us today for State of the Firearms Industry and Future of Military Tech. It's time for our panel, Defending Our Constitutional Rights to Keep and Bear Arms. Our moderator is the lovely Jacki Billings, a firearms journalist and the managing editor at Pew Pew Tactical. She has worked in the firearms industry for over 6 years, covering Second Amendment politics, products, and industry news and other topics. Her work has appeared in Pew Pew Tactical, Guns.com, Recoil, Shooting Sports USA, and Concealed Carry magazine. Our first panelist is Mark Oliva, Director for Public Affairs at the National Shooting Sports Foundation, also known as NSSF, the Firearm Industry's Trade Association. He is responsible for NSSF's communications on policy, government relations, and legislative issues. Prior to joining NSSF, Mark served 25 years in the Marine Corps. Thank you, sir. Joining in 1991 and retiring in 2017 at rank of Master Gunnery Sergeant. Mark served in public affairs in the Marine Corps, including a tour as a staff writer for Stars and Stripes newspaper on Okinawa, Japan. Mark's military career included deployments to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, Haiti, the Mediterranean Sea, and he participated in combat operations in multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Mark also saw service as a Defense Legislative Fellow to a Virginia Congressman and was an advisor to the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Wounded Warriors in both the Navy and the Marine Corps before he retired and started his career with NSSF. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Thank you.
Our second panelist is Bob Carey. Captain Bob "Shoe Bob" Carey is a U.S. Navy retired from the U.S. Navy. He's the executive vice president for the Independence Fund, running its government relations, field advocacy, and casework operations from the fund's Washington, D.C. office. Prior to the Independence Fund, Shoe Bob served as the director of military and veteran engagement for the Republican National Committee, providing national support for state and campaign committees in reaching military and veteran voters on the issues most important to them, and in assisting those campaigns and voters in navigating the complex military voting process. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Jacki, welcome. Please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm really excited to talk to you guys today. It's going to be good. So let's dive in. Mark, I'm going to kick it off with you. Today, as we speak, the Supreme Court is hearing arguments over an NRA-backed challenge to New York gun law. NSSF filed an amicus on the NYSRPA case. So can you run me through this a little bit more, maybe talk about the ramifications of Article 265 for those who maybe don't understand what that is, and where do you think this is ultimately headed?
Yeah, so Jacki, it's so good to be on this panel with you. And for those of you who aren't familiar, some of those in the industry, Jacki's a well-known name among the gun circles, has been writing about guns for a long time. And for those of the veterans in the community, folks like Nate Horvath, Bobby Cox, some of the others that you'll see on here, those are the folks I reached out to when I was trying to make my transition and trying to learn my way into this industry. So please, continue to stay in touch with those folks. But back to the question on the case that was heard on the Supreme Court today, it really goes down to shall issue versus the may issue concealed carry laws that they have in the state. So states like I live in, and Virginia is a shall issue state. The state has to have a reason to not give you a concealed carry permit. New York has a may issue, and they want an applicant to be able to show good cause or show that they are a good standing citizen to be able to hand over a concealed carry permit. The arguments today by the New York State Rifle Pistol Association are that is basically a discriminatory way for the state to deny a permit without any kind of reasoning, and it goes back to what Heller affirmed in the 2008 decision of Heller that said, the Second Amendment it affirms that you have a right as an individual to keep and bear arms, and if you can't bear those arms out in public, whether that be open carry or concealed carry, then you're being denied your basic essential Second Amendment rights.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens as well, what the Supreme Court ultimately decides on that.
Yeah, some of the initial reactions I've been watching this morning are they're saying that there were a lot of pointed questions. Obviously, I was talking to Emily Miller, who's been writing about guns for some time yesterday, and I posited to her yesterday that this court really has been transformationally changed over the past couple of years. It is now a much more conservative Supreme Court. I don't believe it's any longer the Chief Justice Roberts Court. I believe that this is the Thomas court now, that you have people who are wedded to ideas of originalism, that the law means what it was written at the time it was written, and that stays true over time. It doesn't change. So it'll be interesting to see how it comes out. It's always a dangerous thing to predict what the Supreme Court's going to do, but some of the initial first blush reporting of it it looks really good for those of us who treasure our Second Amendment rights. Yeah,
for sure. We'll be keeping an eye on that. Bob, I'm going to come over to you now. As the current chairman for the National Defense Committee, your team executes grassroots advocacy for military personnel, their families, and veterans, focusing on civil rights issues, including protecting the constitutional rights of military personnel and veterans. As it pertains to today's topic, what are some current issues you're focused on, and can you give me some reasons why?
Well, thank you very much for having us on board, and I'm sorry that I don't have my picture up, my screen up as a Remfo squid. Technology gets a little difficult for me, so if any of you guys can figure out how to be able to help me, that would be appreciated. I don't have my ITs around with me. One of the big issues that we work with at National Defense Committee, as well as with the Independence Fund, is, and this is probably going to be a swear word for you all, is the VA's fiduciary program, and the impact that has on veterans seeking mental health care, necessary mental health care, which they rate, which they need, which is available, because of a reasonable fear that they are either going to be reported to a red flag court, or they're going to be, placed into the fiduciary program. And the fact that the fiduciary program, that any bureaucratic rating official or any clinician can say, I don't think you can handle your VA benefits, and refer you to the fiduciary program, and then the burden of proof is on the veteran to, within 60 days, prove to the VA that they're competent to handle their own benefits. Otherwise, it's going to be taken away from them, without any judicial review, is really remarkable. But then you throw on top of that then the VA says, oh, now that you're in the fiduciary program, we are classifying you as a mental defective under the Brady Gun Control Act of 1998, and they report you to the NICS database, and you're no longer allowed to possess or purchase a firearm. Again, all without judicial review. I know that many of the folks on this call have been actively involved in this issue, and appreciate that. And we actually, sent a proposal for rulemaking, petition for rulemaking to the White House during the Trump administration. And unfortunately, they just didn't have the time to be able to move that forward. But we're actively working on trying to reform the fiduciary program, so that veterans don't have to worry about getting the mental health care they need, for fear of being placed into some gun control program run by the VA.
Yeah, for sure, and that's a very important topic. Mark, I'm going to come back over to you real quick. Let's talk some recent big wins for the firearms industry. Exciting stuff. First off, we had the defeat of the director of the ATF nominee, David Chipman. And then also we have the Texas Firearm Industry Non-Discrimination Act. Can you talk to me a little bit about these and how these victories protect the rights of individuals and businesses?
Yeah, so the first thing to understand about the nomination of David Chipman was he is still a gun control lobbyist. He's actually sending out solicitations for fundraisers for Givers Gun Control right now, actually using NSS's name, using my boss's name, Larry Keene. This would have been tantamount to President Trump having nominated Wayne LaPierre to be his ATF director. So it was that would have been unacceptable to the gun control side. This was unacceptable to us as an industry. David Chipman has testified prior to his nomination on the Hill that he wanted to ban what we call modern sporting rifles, so your AR-15 style rifle. If he couldn't ban it, then he wanted to put it under the 1934 NFA, which we treat it the same way we treat suppressors, short barrel rifles, short barrel shotguns. Requires extra background checks, turn it all as tax stamp. You could be inspected by the ATF at any time. We contend that this rifle is simply what it is, a semi-automatic centerfire rifle. And one squeeze of the trigger, one round expended. It is not the same rifle that any of us carried in the military. The M16 or the M4 that I carried it was an automatic firearm, different firearm. So those are some of the contentions. And it goes also back to the campaign. During the campaign, both President Biden and Vice President Harris had both said they wanted to use the ATF as a cudgel against the industry, that they would be able to shut down any retailer, any manufacturer for a single violation during an inspection. Most of these small indiscretions, we're talking like misplaced period, maybe a wrong entry in the wrong spot. You were missing a date on an A&D book or an acquisition disposition book. Those are usually what they call findings. And those are corrections that you can make, and the ATF inspectors try to help most of those businesses correct those things before they become issues. They were wanting to use those things to be able to shut businesses down. So this was the handpicked choice from Bloomberg, from some of the other gun control groups, that they wanted to have this man in there to be able to steer the ATF into the area of politics. Now, as the industry, we have a great relationship with the ATF. We want a great relationship. We want a confirmed director. It makes the industry work easier. Unfortunately, this administration wanted to be able to take that and use it as a political tool to dismantle gun rights. And that's why we fought so hard against it. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things, the fact that we're able to defeat that. Going into it, it looked really tough. It's really hard to defeat a presidential nominee. There's a lot of deference that the senators give to the president when they nominate somebody. So this was a really difficult thing. And it really has to go out to say the bravery of some of those senators to be able to stand up for what they believe is right. And it comes down to Angus King out of Maine, independent, who caucuses with the Democrats, who just said, I can't stomach this. There's no way I can do it. And it was him that sunk it. And there were several other Democratic senators who hadn't come out that we believed were going to oppose, but he really led that charge for the industry. We talk about the Texas FIND Act. So this is the Firearm Industry Non-Discrimination Act. And this bill that was passed in Texas basically said that if big banks like Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, these big banks that have these big contracts with the states, municipalities, they hold these state bonds. If they have discriminatory policies against firearm industry, which they do, Citigroup does. JP Morgan Chase won't do business with an AR maker. Citigroup won't do business with an AR maker. If they have that, they can't benefit from the taxpayer monies that are coming through and turn around and use that money to push gun control on the citizens of Texas. So that was a huge blow to these companies, to these corporations in Texas, because Texas just being so big and having so many municipal contracts. The interesting thing is the same bill was introduced in Louisiana, and it was passed by both chambers and was vetoed by Governor John Bel Edwards. Just over the past couple of weeks, though, the Attorney General Landry has come out and said that he's going to adopt the same policy because he sits on the state's Treasury Commission. So he's going to push that policy anyway because he doesn't want to see the citizens of Louisiana have to pay for the gun control that they want to reject too. So we see that this is catching fire. The same bill's being introduced up in Ohio. We know that several other states are looking at it. So we think that this really is a model to be able to push back some of this woke capitalism that's being pushed onto the industry to deny you your Second Amendment rights.
Yeah, for sure. We'll definitely be watching all of that as well. Bob, as the former director of military and veterans engagement for the Republican National Committee, you led a very aggressive campaign targeting veteran voters in 2016. Why do you think it's imperative that listeners today consider supporting fellow veterans in office and as they run for office?
Oh, really good point. And the veteran vote is crucial. I got to tell you, though, in order to be able to find that veteran vote, I went to so many Blue Angels and Thunderbird air shows that if I saw one more, I was going to jump in a cockpit myself and be number 4, number 4 slot wing. But the fact of the matter is that President Trump won the veteran vote in 2016 by 27 points. He won it 61-34. No one has ever won the veteran vote by that amount. John McCain, combat veteran, prisoner of war, he only won it by 10 points. George Bush, 41, he lost it to Bill Clinton, even though he was a combat veteran himself. And the reason is because President Trump made veterans issues, front and center, and both the campaign and the Republican National Committee invested the time and effort. We hired 50 veteran field personnel. We identified 1.8 million voters in our voter database as veterans, and we brought 2.8 million additional veteran voters to the polls in 2016 compared to 2012. And, 98% of the margin of victory, the veteran margin of victory in North Carolina represented 98% of the overall veteran margin of victory. Now, for candidates, this is relatively easy. This is not, it was great that the president had as aggressive as a policy platform as he did on veterans issues, that he made it so front and center. But, where this really comes down to it is the unsexy work of knocking on doors and making phone calls. And so when we put together our veteran task force in each of the states, it wasn't about, I'm going to write you white papers about this. No, we need you to Wednesday night, bring down a couple boxes of pizza and lead a group of volunteer veterans in making veteran to veteran phone calls. And we found that when a veteran called another veteran on the phone, or a veteran knocked on another veteran's door and said, I'm a veteran, they kept the door open and they stayed on the phone twice as often, and they stayed on the phone for twice as long. Because whether they were a veteran or not, just saying, hi, I'm Bob. I'm here working on this campaign, and I'm a veteran. Boom. People are like, I can't be mean to this guy. They may hate my candidate, but they can't be mean to me. And I still get the chance to make that. So, field work is where it's at. It's not sexy. It's not, you're not writing policy, but it's how you get people out to vote. And when you have a maximum 65% voter participation rate, if you bring 5% more of your base out to the election, you're gonna sway that vote by 10 points. So that's my lesson learned. Get out Absolutely. There. And in fact, the last 6 weeks of the campaign, I wasn't in DC. I was in North Carolina and Florida, and I was knocking doors and I was making phone calls.
Yeah, for sure. Mark, an upcoming priority for NSSF is defending the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. Again, New York's trying to sidestep this, and the Biden administration wants to repeal it. So why is this act so important?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Jackie. The Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act was signed into law in 2005, 2006. It basically says that you can't sue a gun manufacturer and a retailer for criminal actions of a non-associated third party. Basically, what that comes down to is you can't sue a gun maker because a criminal misused a firearm in the commission of their crime. This would be akin to saying you're going to sue Budweiser and Ford because they caused the death through a drunk driving accident. So that really what it comes down to. It's something that is not unique to the firearm industry, although this law was written for the firearm industry. There are similar protections right now for everyone who's gotten their COVID shot. Those pharmaceutical companies are also protected by laws that specifically cover them. Airline industries have the same sort of protections for them. It's not unique, and that's what they try to, on the other side, try to carve it out and say this is unique protection. It also doesn't protect the industry against mistakes that they make. If a firearm manufacturer makes a faulty product, they can be held accountable for that, and they can be sued for that. It just keeps them from those harassing lawsuits. And what was happening prior to 2006, is it started in the early 90s, actually under Andrew Cuomo when he was the HUD secretary, was that they were stacking up these lawsuits to basically bleed the companies dry. They were all getting thrown out of court, but it was taking time and money to defend against these in court. So that law is really essential to making sure that that these industries aren't going to be bled dry by these lawsuits. New York recently passed a law that said they would allow these lawsuits to go forward. Now that's a state law, and it's also in contravention now to federal law. So somewhere that law is going to be challenged, and we expect it will be challenged. And so far, the Department of Justice actually here in just the past couple of months has defended the constitutionality of the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. There is a challenge to it in Pennsylvania right now that we're watching it continue to go through. But every time that this law has come up for review, the courts have thrown it all and thrown out the challenges to this law and said, yes, it is a lawful law. It does have constitutional grounding, and it basically keeps those harassing lawsuits at bay. And it's vital that we have this law so that way these firearm manufacturers who are making the arms that you and I both enjoy for our own in recreational shooting or self-protection or hunting, but these are also the same manufacturers that are providing the law enforcement their firearms and providing our military their firearms. So when they start going after the gun makers in America who are providing arms to those folks, it becomes a real issue, because if we drive out all those makers, where are we going to buy the arms to be able to defend our nation and protect our communities?
Yeah, absolutely. Bob, final question. You got it. The Independence Fund is one of the most influential wounded warrior groups in the U.S. Can you talk a little bit about its mission and current advocacy efforts?
Thank you very much. The Independence Fund is we service catastrophically disabled veterans, their caregivers, and their families, as well as work on suicide prevention programs for tactical combat units, where we bring together those tactical combat units in a long weekend unit reunion, partner with the VA to provide psychoeducation on resiliency, and then provide follow-on assistance in order to be able to utilize the camaraderie of arms, brotherhood of arms, to now battle suicide rather than the physical enemy. And we found a lot of great success with that. Our bread and butter is these track chairs. Think of mechanized wheelchairs with cross-country wheelchairs with tank treads, and we provided over 2,600 of those to catastrophically disabled veterans over the years. But then also we've recently started a program called TIF Tactical. It's our competitive shooting team. We're trolling the Marine Corps and Army shooting teams online to try to get them to compete against us. But we do go around and compete in shooting events. And if it wasn't Veterans Day, which is like, the busiest day in the year for a veteran service organization, we'd be at the Meritorious event as well. But we go around the country with this to do adaptive shooting as well as adaptive hunting. And if there are folks out there that want to figure out how to be able to get assistance or get involved in something like this, please feel free to reach out at advocacy@independencefund.org. And that's our group email address. But then on the advocacy side, we work very heavily on the issues of community care and making sure that veterans have timely access to care outside of the VA when the VA is not able to provide it to them personally. As a disabled veteran myself, I use this all the time. And there are plenty of people that want to get rid of it. And we have to be constantly aware to make sure that that it's kept. We also work hard on reforming the fiduciary program to make sure that it doesn't become a secondary gun control program, and also on protecting veteran gun rights from the VA using red flag courts as a method of suicide control, suicide prevention. And then we also do a lot of work on the legislation regarding suicide prevention. We're very heavily involved on showing the linkage with combat deployments and veteran suicide, an issue that we think the VA has ignored for too long. And in fact, I'm doing my graduate work on exactly that issue and doing research on that as well. And then we also work very hard on the caregiver program. There's been announcements recently that come October 1st of 2022, when the legacy caregivers grandfather period expires, that 6,700 caregivers are going to be disenrolled from the program. And we're talking caregivers to single, double, triple amputees, quadriplegics, combat wounded veterans. And because they don't meet some bureaucratic level, they're gonna get rid of them. We do. People ask about social media. It's a big part of how we generate our advocacy, by doing social media and cell phone ads to get people to sign on to stuff in crucial portion. So that's it for me. Those are what we do, and anyone that wants help get involved, they can check us out on our website. If they want to apply for any of our programs, independencefund.org, and we have a really robust program there as well. We're also doing a lot of work to help our Afghan allies be able to evacuate from Afghanistan. We got 12,000 out so far, working with the Mighty Oaks Foundation with a group we've formed called Save Our Allies. You can check them out at saveourallies.org. As well as providing assistance to the SIV applicants and awardees as they are transitioning from the 8 safe haven military facilities to their local communities to start their new lives in America.
Awesome. You guys are doing a lot of good work, so definitely keep it up. We have a Q&A question. Let's see. What role do you think social media plays in the fight for the Second Amendment and the firearms industry as a whole? Mark, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll jump on that one. So the firearm industry, so NSSF, we are a trade association, like any other trade association. Just happens to be our business is guns and ammo. So we're mostly a business to business kind of thing, but there are equities that we want to make sure that our members and the public is generally aware of. I think social media is absolutely critical to everything that we do. And I think it's more importantly is to make sure that we're educating people as to what's happening. There's a lot of misinformation out there on both sides. Sometimes even our own advocates maybe get some of the nuances of what's trying to be done a little bit wrong. And when we have to make sure that we're mindful to be able to correct that and make sure that we're getting people connected, not only with the information, but getting them connected with the policymakers. So it's one thing to get fired up and get on the chat room and complain about maybe a policy proposal that we see that's not good. Like we've seen the two proposed rules that are going to be very likely finalized by this administration that we think are very harmful. But you have to get connected with the policymakers. And that means contacting your lawmakers in Washington, D.C., contacting your state lawmakers and letting them know that you're going to hold them accountable for their votes on these things. So I think it's absolutely critical that people use social media as a tool, not only to become educated, but to be able to reach out and let their lawmakers know that they're watching.
Absolutely. It is a great tool. I know we use it. So yeah, I agree with everything you just said. We have another question. Yay. Demographics wise, have you seen the disparity between young military members versus senior active duty minded individuals? It's absolutely an issue. Bob, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. From the Pew Center on the States did a survey of younger veterans. And while they are they label themselves much more independent than the general population, they still are overwhelmingly conservative. And so I don't think that you're, and the Second Amendment issues always resonated very deeply with veterans. 45% of all veterans own a firearm. And that's, far above the national average. They're comfortable with them. They find great joy in competitive shooting or even in just recreational shooting. And who doesn't like venison for dinner? I think that it is an area that you can immediately connect with a veteran on, because every veteran is shot. Whether they still do or not is a different matter, but every veteran is shot, and they still have the smell of gunpowder in their nostrils from the range, and you never forget that. So I think it's even if they don't actively talk about it, it's an area where politically you can connect with them. Absolutely. And the hook is up by Catherine.
Hello. Jacki, thank you so much for the great questions. Mark, Bob, thank you for the wonderful feedback. I learned a lot. I know some people were commenting about SHOT Show, so they're looking forward to that, as am I, if I can get over to Vegas. A round of applause to our esteemed panel. Thank you again for joining us today.